Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Coming up on The Payoff, Anna David is a New York Times best-selling author. She is also a force of nature who is 23 years sober. I could tell you all about it, but every other podcast I listen to do research on her, she's so accomplished. When people do the intro, it takes like 5 minutes. So I'm going to let her take care of business. This conversation with Anna David was one of my favorite in the time I've done this podcast, and we're coming up on 4 years. So please listen and please enjoy. But first, Kevin Souza. The first thing I want to start with, obviously I find people like you interesting regardless because of your success, but also like I find other sober people like super interesting. You know, that's why I started to do this, because somebody's experience, strength, and hope is super inspiring. And yours, you began, I'm from the Northeast, so I remember Crazy Eddie, and I've heard you speak about your dad, who was...
Oh my God, you know that? Even, sorry, my cat will come in and out. I'll be chill about it.
Yeah.
Crazy Eddie. Oh my God.
So your dad was like the Crazy Eddie of like Marin County up in Northern California.
I don't even really talk about that much, but he was in Daly City, which was like actually kind of like an hour and a half away, but of the Bay Area.
So you grew up, I mean, you grew up with, you're a person of means. Like you grew up in a nice area.
It's complicated, but yes.
Yeah, it does get complicated from what I learned, and part of your trauma, right? With part of our we all have, everybody has their degree of family stuff, right? And it's like, it happened to you. So it's a big deal. Like, because I'm always comparing myself out like, well, that person had that happen and that seems like it was this incredible situation, and I'll kind of minimize my own stuff, right?
Yeah, and here's what I'll say about mine. I know of far worse stories. I don't know of any that's more confusing. Like my trauma is, these people are wizards, my family, at trauma. Like it's next level. And so, I always think mine's worse than everyone's, and it's not. I mean, I've heard stories of torture, so, but mine was only emotional torture. But so, yes, I'm very impressed with your research.
Yes. So you grew up in that area. You had this sort of like prolific figure for a father, or at least like charismatic, and he was out there.
No, the least charismatic human ever, but he was out there. Yes.
Okay. So he was out there, and you started he gets in some trouble. He builds this kind of like stereo thing like empire, and you're making money, but then he gets in some trouble and you're in high school, and it all kind of syncs up with when you start to drink and use. Like, take us through some of that.
We're recording. I totally didn't even realize we were recording.
Yeah, we're going.
Oh man, have we recorded this whole time? I was just like so charmed.
We're gonna chop off.
We're
gonna take off the beginning part. Don't worry. Yeah.
You can do whatever. Okay, so people always say it's like, oh, this happened and this happened, but that doesn't make me an alcoholic. And I always say it's like, maybe it didn't, but it sure didn't help. And I know very few people who are in recovery who didn't have pretty not well families, or trauma. In some, maybe the trauma wasn't related to their family. So it's interesting because when you said that, what you just said about like the timing being my dad getting in trouble and the using started, totally brought me back to when I was in rehab. I remember my counselor saying that, and it was that conversation when I don't know if you had this. I'm sorry. How long are you sober? I forgot to even ask.
No, it's cool. Just had 12 years, and I know you just had 23.
23.
Yeah.
And so it's like I remember having that conversation with his name's Sammy and being like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm an alcoholic. And he goes, you described to me these nights of, doing cocaine alone all night long. Now, if you told me that happened to you once or twice, I would say maybe we could have that conversation. You're telling me it happened hundreds of times. And anyway, in that conversation, we talked about that. As I look back now with much more, sort of analysis, yeah, those things were related, but it's more like um my dad is a really troubled guy. And so that was just more indicative of his troubles than something that traumatized me. I've always, for whatever reason, and I think it's really saved me, not really felt like ashamed of my I felt so different from them that nothing they did ever really rubs off on me except what they do to me. So it's kind of like I was just like, it was more it didn't make me feel ashamed. It was just more kind of what my family does. That makes sense.
It does make sense. And when you talk about, you start to drink in, like, I think you talk like you're 12 years old or eighth grade. Do you remember what kind of impact that had on you? Because for me, it was my first
Oh,
spiritual
wow.
experience. I mean, I always say this, and people that listen to this get tired. They probably don't even care enough to get tired. But when I was in eighth grade, I was terrified to go to the dance. And then I started
Right.
to drink in ninth grade, and I could not wait to get there. And not everyone was like that, I've come to learn. Was that a similar situation for you?
It's so similar. I remember it so well. And it's interesting because I go to 12-step meetings every day still. And the speaker this morning said it so well. He's like, "Look, I would never have lost my virginity if it wasn't for drinking." He's like, "I literally would not
Yeah.
have." So for me, the first drink was not that magical, but the second one was high school. Um, Everybody was in love with Mike Zimmerman. Mike, if you're listening, I'm not sure what's happened to you, but I was a freshman. He was a senior. We were all obsessed with him. And I, couldn't speak in his presence. And then at this party, Andrew Pavlovsky's party, I remember I went, I drank beer. I felt good. I felt amazing. And when he walked by, I said to him, I have AD plus MZ written on my binder. And I was like, I can't believe that came out of my mouth. And he goes, really? I have MZ plus AD written on mine. And I had this moment where I was like, okay, alcohol not only gives me the ability to say what I've always wanted to say, but it gets me what I want. And that was pretty magical.
Yeah. Oh my God. So much for me too. The same exact stuff. I love what you just shared about that, what that speaker said this morning. Like, as a guy, especially, I don't know. In my mind, it's like we're supposed to take the lead or whatever, and I can never say anything. And
Yeah.
once I drank, I could. And so
Yeah.
for your situation like that, it starts to really impact you, and we think like a positive way, right? And I've seen some of the talks that you've given, like just glimpses of them at college campuses. I love when you talk about, it's like this finite self-esteem that it gives us. We never learn any of these behaviors to talk to other people, to deal with stuff. How much did you use alcohol and drugs as like a conduit to relationships and other people?
It was really everything after a while. And I remember thinking, if I met someone during the day, I'd think, I wish I could meet them at night because my nighttime self is so much better. And it was like, no, it was my drinking self that was so much better. And in many ways, it did help me establish a personality that did exist outside of drinking. But yeah, it just becomes such a part of what you do that you don't even really think of it. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I got sober and I heard, we all live with 100 forms of fear, I thought, oh, how sad for these people that they're so scared. Not me. I'm not scared of anything.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize I still am grappling with fear.
Yeah, that's why we still that's why you woke up and went to a meeting this morning. I mean,
Yeah.
and when I realized my answer and my key to any kind of like healthy existence is understanding that I still have those fears, and I have to I got to squash them, because a lot of times they're just bullshit, but I need to go places What, for me too, it's 12-step where I can figure it
Yeah.
out. So you end up starting to do, we're like kindred spirits. I was a big time. Once I started to do cocaine, I was like, I'm going to do this every day for the rest of my life. Like,
Yeah.
how did that grab you, and what happened to your life when that addiction started to take hold?
Yeah, I mean, Coke was so amazing those first few times. And then it's like I heard somebody say a comedian in a 12-step room say, I hated cocaine. I just liked the way it smelled. Because after a while, it's like, oh my God, the hatred. I remember the first time I did it was in high school. We were visiting college campuses. My high school took us to, I went to college in Connecticut, by
You
the
went
way.
to Trinity.
Yeah, huge fan of the Northeast.
Yeah.
Where are you? You're in Boston?
No, I'm from Philadelphia. I'm in Texas right now. Yeah.
Oh, big fan of Texas too. I'm kind of a fan of everywhere that isn't Los Angeles right now or California.
That's where you are.
Yeah. But so we went, I don't remember what school we were visiting, and I remember some guy had Coke.
Can I tell you what school it was? Because I heard it was Dartmouth.
No, because I've never been to Dartmouth.
Okay. I've heard you say I think it was Dartmouth before. Okay, go ahead.
You know my life better than I do. You know the story already? Because
No,
I've never told.
Come on, let's go.
So I just remember we're in I think it was the men's bathroom. Like it was guys, and they were like, "Come, you Coke." And what I remember about it is the look on this guy's, Chris Green. I remember the look on his face of like he wasn't doing it, and he saw me do it, and I was like, kind of that thing I saw in him. I was like, oh, maybe what I'm doing is shocking, because look how shocked that person looks. I don't feel shocked by it at all. To me, it's like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And then I don't think I did it for no. Then I did it at prom. And those nights where it just goes really awry. I remember we're in a limo and somebody tells the story, like someone's got the Coke out. Someone tells the story. They're like, did you know Len Bias died the first time he did cocaine? Do you know? I don't even know who that is. He's an athlete.
Oh yeah. He played at Maryland, and because I'm a sports guy, he played at Maryland. He was a number 2 draft pick by the Celtics. And the night after he got drafted, he overdosed on Coke.
Which is, it's pretty hard to do that. I mean, it's not common compared to other drugs. And that's a really beginning of like a really bad trip. I know we don't trip on Coke, but I remember someone said that, and then like I did my line, and I was like, oh my God. And then, it didn't work. Like I'm just freaking out. My heart's racing, all that stuff. And then, I tried it, I did it, college, whatever. And then it really takes off once you are buying it yourself, and that wasn't until about 97.
So so you go to Trinity, and then you've been a writer since Jump, right? You've always been a writer creatively. This is before, during, and after, right? Like addiction, right? Or drug use and alcohol use. How did you get started writing?
So I majored in creative writing, and I was actually submitting stories to Highlights magazine when I was like 12 years old.
Yeah.
And then I had at the end of college, I realized that everyone else has plans, and they're like, I'm going to acting school. I'm going to the Morgan Stanley trainee program. And I was like, wait, I have no idea. Nobody told me I had to figure this out. And I'm sure they did tell me, and I just didn't listen. And I go, oh my God, I got to get shit for my resume. So I go and I start writing for the school paper. I had never done that. And I, the defunct literary magazine, I was like, let's start it up again, and I can be the editor. So we did that. And then I got an internship at Hartford Monthly Magazine. And so through that, I was able to, I moved to New York, and I interned at Mirabella Magazine, which is now long gone, and Entertainment Weekly, which was brand new at the time. And so they were flush with cash. Again, this is the 90s. And so I got paid as an intern. I got paid more than I got paid at my first job at a magazine. And so I was interning there, super fun, going to premieres, went to like the premiere of Reservoir Dogs, like kind of was just like in this fun thing.
And by the way, those magazines at the time that was all we had. So like if you wanted to read a story about the production of Good Will Hunting, you would read a piece in Entertainment Weekly, and you were like, holy shit, you get all this incredible. And I know like that you were part of that vehicle, right?
Well, yeah, and actually, when I interned, Matt would come, and like we would go to lunch. He would like come up to whatever floor that was.
Matt Damon.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Right. Because I dated him in college.
Oh, really? Okay.
You know the most random stuff about me, and you don't know that? That's hilarious. Yeah, when well, I had a lot of friends at Harvard. My brother went there, and a lot of my friends went there. And so we would go there on the weekends. It was an hour and a half drive from Hartford. And, frankly, like they really liked this influx of girls, of like fun party girls there. And one weekend I was visiting my friend Matthew, and that's so weird. I was thinking about him yesterday. That's so weird. And I met Matt, and I will tell you that I met him, and at the beginning of the night he's like, "Oh my God, you're gonna be my girlfriend." And I was like, "I don't even like that guy, whatever." And I've never seen someone so determined. His determination, by the end of the night, I was like, "I'm in love with this guy." The following Friday, that was a Saturday. The following Friday, he was shooting a movie called School Ties, and
Sure.
he's like, "Come visit me in Lowell." And I borrowed my roommate's car, and I had a friend at Wellesley who actually knew him. And so I picked up Susanna, and we drove to the set, and I walked on the set, and he's like, "Oh, hey, this is my girlfriend, Anna." So like within a week, that
Wow.
was that. And that was senior year.
See, that's pretty good senior year.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah.
I mean, at the time I was like, "Oh, my boyfriend's going to be so successful. He's such a good actor." And everyone's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." No one listened.
I mean, he was
Yeah.
already in school. I guess the movie hadn't come out yet, but School Ties was a great movie, and he was great in that. Like he that
And
was
School Ties was
yeah.
a terrible movie
Oh
that
no,
did
School
not do
Ties
well.
was a great, but it was a great movie. I mean, that was as
I never liked it, but and who knows? I haven't seen
yeah.
it in a long time.
Whatever, you know what I want to know? Whatever happened to the tall guy? And remember the tall, good-looking guy?
Randall Battenkoff.
What?
Okay, I have a weird thing about that. First of all, I did go to the premiere of School Ties with him in New York at like it was at Rockefeller Plaza,
Okay.
Rockefeller Center, I think. It's vague in 90. That was 92.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, so Randall Battenkoff, here's the full circle nature. When I was on that very college trip, we went to Brown, and I was walking through the hallway, and I was like, "That is the most gorgeous man I have ever seen." And
Yes.
we ended up having a moment. So when I meet Matt, he goes, "Yeah, I live with this guy, Randall Battenkoff." I'm like, "I know him. I like made out with him when I visited Brown."
Oh my
And he's like,
God.
"That's so weird." So Randall, he's awesome. He was in actually literally one of my favorite movies of all time, which is called Walking and Talking. Came out late 90s.
Okay, never
The
seen that, but
Nicole
he was in a
Holland
ton.
Spencer.
He was featured in a ton of big movies around that time, and he never really turned the corner. Look, you and I disagree on the quality of School Times, but we both
Yeah.
agree on his star potential. He was the man, and he was a stud too.
Oh, he was a stud. He's the nicest guy ever.
Yeah.
And those guys all looked up to him so much because he was already working. And they were
Wow.
like, and I remember Matt telling me that like they would go to breakfast, and all those guys were like, "Can I get pancakes and bacon?" And Randall would be like, "Can I get yogurt with fruit?" And he sort of like taught them about how to be,
Be a
how to
pro.
be that kind of actor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, so this is awesome. So you date Matt Damon, and this is let's I'm going to bring us back to Entertainment Weekly. You were writing for them, and again, like
Yeah.
that was such an incredible resource for people like me on the outside. At that time, I was in college, but you could go to a Barnes and Noble and read Entertainment Weekly, and there was no other avenue to learn all this stuff. So you are prime time, like in you working out of college.
Yeah, I really have this Forrest Gumpian quality of like randomly ending up at the party where I meet Matt. I was in Jeff Bezos's wedding. Mackenzie was like my first friend. We were in the
Wow.
same play group. So it's like I weirdly end up in these places, have no idea they're going to be places that I'll one day it almost feels like I'm lying,
Yeah.
even though this was my life. So the thing about Entertainment Weekly, yes, I was there at a great time. I was also a total like just a little bit of an entitled lazy person. And so, we had a group of interns, and Jessica Shaw was this intern who like she's going out at night, and she's like sees Martin Scorsese and tracks him down and does a feature interview. I'm going around to the different editors and being like, "Do you have any premiere invites you don't want?" Like I was not doing
Yeah.
anything. And so I did not get hired there. She still works there. Like that's what you get if you're motivated. I really wanted to get a job. I needed to get a job. And I met an editor there who said, I met him in the elevator, this guy, Steve Redcliffe, And I think he's a TV editor at the New York Times still. But at the time, he's like, I just got made editor-in-chief of Parenting Magazine, which is in San Francisco. And I said, oh, I'm from San Francisco. I'm from Marin. And he said, oh, yeah, I just had my daughter. I go, what's her name? He's like, Anna. I'm like, my name's Anna. So it was this kind of like thing where I think that I sort of impressed him for absolutely no reason.
Yeah.
And he goes, if you want a job, we're looking for an editorial assistant. It turns out, I later found out, like, he kind of wanted to come in the way a new leader comes in with, like, I'm bringing in my team. So he hires me as this assistant to this wonderful man. He was the best boss I ever had, this guy, Bruce Raskin. And Bruce told me, he was like, what? Why are you bringing in this assistant? I should hire my assistant. Anyway, so I worked there for 3 years in San Francisco.
And so what's the party situation like? Now you seem like you have at least, like, you're interning, you're still interning at this real high profile place. Now you have like some, like, we'll call it stability.
Oh God, no stability whatsoever.
So what's life like?
Allegedly. So I moved back to San Francisco and I was making $16,000 a year. So I was having to get some help from my family, and I'm living in San Francisco, and I do not like San Francisco. I just do not like it. And I was really unhappy there, and I really wanted to escape. And it did feel like my friends from college were getting very serious. Yes, I sort of had the hallmarks of stability, but I was like constantly looking for people who wanted to have fun and not just be so serious. And I met a guy and like fell in love with him, and he lived in LA, and I moved to LA, and that was in 96. And I never left, except I have moved to New York and back, but I've essentially been here since 96.
So you're at the forefront of, like, now you're at the internet, like, boom, right? And so all these places are looking for writers like yourself. So were you able to ride that wave, like, as far as work was concerned?
Yeah, from 96 to really 2007, I would say, the magazine thing was still happening, and it was awesome. And I was super able to write it. I worked at Premiere Magazine.
You worked at People Magazine?
I got fired from People. I managed to get fired without actually being an employee, which is a real talent. I was a full-time freelancer, and I was fired and in this kind of dramatic way. And then
hold on, what kind of dramatic way? What happened?
Okay, I really had a terrible attitude, and I was really entitled, and I really do think my alcoholism.
This is alcoholic shit you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like, born on third base, thought I hit a triple. I heard that in a meeting once, and that was me, right? I was from a nice area outside Philly. I really didn't have to want for anything growing up, and then I was like, I was just entitled. Like, what do people have to give me?
Yeah, totally entitled. Totally. I always had a work ethic, but it didn't matter because my attitude really prevented me from being able to do anything. And so, but all this stuff happened. I have no idea if I'm going to too much detail. You're such a good interviewer that I'm like being brought back. So I at People, you'd go out and you'd get quotes from celebrities at night and, at open bar places. And so I do remember one night I got a quote from Kenny G. Remember Kenny G?
The saxophonist.
Yeah. And I must have gotten it wrong and made him like, I think he's like a bleeding heart Democrat. And I think that I got the quote mixed up and it was like super uber Republican. And so that quote ran and I got into a lot of trouble. I was getting in trouble for stuff like that, but I was like, you're lucky to have me kind of a thing. And then I was fired. And then, really circled the drain. I worked at Disney. That didn't go so well. I was doing coverage of scripts. And that wasn't going super well. And then, and like my alcoholism was like, I would go, okay, a gram is $60. This was the 90s. I get paid $50 to do basically a book report on a screenplay, but $60 if it's an overnight one. So my math skills have never been good, but I was like, that seems like a good deal. I'll buy a gram of Coke and I'll read this script and I'll do the thing. And I was an aspiring screenwriter at the time. So I was pretty bitter at these people who had representation and were getting their scripts submitted. So I would just kind of say they were all terrible. So that didn't that didn't go well. And then I actually was working at a website. So then, yes, the internet boom. I'm working at this website called Style Click, and I'm being paid pretty well. And I'm a disaster. I am like doing coke in the bathroom. I am not doing well. And God, this part's so weird. This part I don't remember that well. I just decided to put myself in rehab, literally.
And that's how it started.
That's how it started. Yeah.
Will you skip some stuff I want to touch on
Yeah.
before we get to your recovery? So one of the things I heard you talk about was you were writing like specs for TV shows, and you were doing it when you were coked out of your mind, and you were doing it on shows that you hadn't even seen before.
That is absolutely accurate. I wrote a bunch of specs for Third Rock from the Sun, a show I'd never seen.
So
that.
for people who don't know, what's a spec, by the way?
It's a sample script. It's basically like watching the show and coming up with an idea and writing the script. So yeah, so I was doing that. That was not good. I wrote a Dawson's Creek where they're all on coke. And I remember I wrote it at my grandmother's in in Palm Springs, like all like wired. So yeah, that didn't work out. I did write a Sex and the City spec that got a ton of attention. It was like almost like a fever dream. Like I just wrote this one thing that was really good, and I had agents wooing me, and I did get an agent, and I didn't get work from that, but it was like that was a big thing. But I was still a disaster.
So when you end up and you like, I know for me, especially cocaine, like you really do end up alone, and it's really weird. And it's just like you're alone a lot. You're literally going totally crazy. And then what happened to you when you said I need help? I heard you say that you, because I can relate to this too. You didn't really have any responsibilities to shrug, so it wasn't like anything like crazy like that happened. But you did something happen where you hit that jumping off point in or I guess 2000 at some point. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, what happened is I wanted to die. I wanted to die like all the time. And I knew that I couldn't keep living with cocaine, and I was totally convinced I couldn't live without it. I was 100% convinced of that. And I had been taken to / gone to meetings. I'd maybe been to like 5 over the previous 3 years. And the
Any
meetings
connection when you went to those meetings, and any like, hey, like, because at this point, if you're at any, you have a problem. I mean, so any connection when you're going to those meetings, anything where you're like, I can come back here if I need to, or you're just like, I'm not like these people, just comparing yourself out.
It was weird because the people were amazing. I saw that they were great, and I was pretty convinced that I could keep drinking. And so I would like, hey, nice to meet you. And I would tell people, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna keep drinking and do this. And I did not think I could do it. And when I got so desperate, and I do not know what happened that morning. So I went to rehab May 2nd of 2000. So it was, I guess, let's say like April 28th. I do not know. That morning was really no different than any other morning. But I woke up and I was like, I can't do this. I cannot do this. And I called my parents and told them that I had a problem. And back then I really looked at them as, my support system. Because they were the closest thing I had to that. And I remember my mom going like, put your cats in the car, come home. And I drove home, and I was so depressed. I was like, this is terrible. But I convinced them, they helped me a little bit financially. And I found a rehab that would let me do outpatient, because I did have a job. So it all goes awry at Style Click, but there are so many websites that I'm able to maneuver
I like how you're,
myself.
by the way, I don't skip over the master manipulator that like can talk their way out of inpatient rehab because you have a job. That's pretty good, because it's tough to do.
Oh my God. They were like, we are not an outpatient rehab. It's promises. Like they had a very well established, we do not do outpatient rehab.
How did you know about promises back then?
Because it was like the only rehab people knew about, because there was like Charlie Sheen went there,
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, this place is really fancy. And I called them, and I forget what the price was, but it was like, wait, that's not that much. I could do this. And I don't know what I said to them, I still to this day, because people when I was there are like, you're outpatient, they don't allow outpatient. um and so I show up the following Monday, which was May 2nd. And I said, I think what I said to them on the phone, I think I was honest, and I said, look, I have a job, and if it's all I have in my life, and if I don't have this job, I have nothing. I have no hope. So will you please allow me to do this job and also do this? I think that's what I said.
Well, congratulations to you and your silver tongue. I went to rehab. I tried to get an extra day at the gym, and they were like, "Fuck off, dude. Go back downstairs." That's not easy. That's not easy to get
Where did
done.
you go?
I went to Karen in Warnersville,
Mm.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Karen's awesome. Do you know Paul Huckemeyer?
No, I mean maybe I met him, but not off the top of my head.
I think he was actually a therapist there, but
Okay.
he was awesome. And my friend Terrence went there.
So that changed my life.
But
So I want to ask you. So I got to treatment for
yeah,
me, and I was like, I was out of gas. I really was. I started to listen. I started to pay attention. I was always like, AA is it's all God, or anything to keep me from getting sober. Right. I was just
yeah.
fighting and fighting. What happened to you? Like, how were you able to transition into recovery, into acceptance, into getting well?
I think the same as you. I was so exhausted by my bullshit, and that I was like, I am willing to do this thing. I knew it would be terrible. I had no delusions that I would like it, but I knew I would kill myself otherwise. And I thought, I'll try it. And I really loved it from the beginning. I mean, rehab's pretty fun.
Yeah.
That's what they don't tell you that.
Yeah.
And we're all smoking cigarettes, and I meet these people, and they're super funny, and they're super cool, and they're talking about, solutions to problems I didn't realize I had until I heard them talking. And I had no one in my life. I had no friends at this point. I had no one that wanted to be around me. And so, and then they were like, we're going to go to a meeting. And I'm like, oh, this fucking AA shit, whatever. And those druggy buggy, they like put us in
Oh
the
yeah,
van,
yeah.
and they take us, and it was actually, I'm so grateful. They took us to these really creepy meetings with total weirdos, like a few people. And that was so much like group therapy that I like fell in love with it before I remembered that I hated it. And that, because they were these small things that reminded me of group, I was able to get over my fear and go to the big ones. And the big ones is really like where I came alive
Yeah.
and found my people.
And I've heard you talk about, like, I grew up in AA, and
Yeah.
I like, forget the fact that it saved my life and it taught me how to live, but I also like learned how to talk. I learned how to just to be,
Yeah.
and it was such an amazing journey. But like you, actually, when I went to, it took me forever, right? Like 10 years to get a year. But when I finally went to rehab, I didn't go back out. You went back out because you had that, okay, cocaine was my problem. And then you had one more, I guess, or one more experience where you tested the theory. Like, what happens when you go out? Like, walk me through that whole process.
Well, I am a very efficient person, and so I was very efficient with my relapse. And it's awesome because it could have lasted a lot longer. What happened with me was like, I started to get that idea, and my AA birthday was this week or last week, so it's like really been in my mind. But I started to get the relapse happens before the relapse, right? And I started to get these ideas. Somebody I went to rehab with, my best friend at rehab, tells me that he did it. He is like, I had a coke bender, and I'm like, was it terrible? Did you hear the birds chirping? Did you want to die? And he goes, no, it was amazing. So like that lodges in my head. Then I'm at a party, and I see this guy who I always thought was like, I dated in the 90s, and I always thought he was the coolest guy ever, and he was sober. And I'm like, hey, guess what? I'm sober now. And he goes, oh yeah, no, I don't do that anymore. Oh God, no AA. And so that lodged in my brain.
Yeah.
And then that very night, I remember this guy says to me, this like guy I was not into, says, hey, do you want to go out? In fact, I could make you dinner this weekend. And it's like this idea planted in my head. I could drink. and I opted not to call my sponsor. I opted to call a guy who's wonderful, who had taken me to a meeting, who's been sober probably like over 30 years now. And I called him and I said, I want to drink tonight. And he said, don't, but you can, but revisit tomorrow. I mean, he said all the right things, but what he did not do is drive over and stop me. And in my entitlement, I thought, well, fuck him. He didn't help. And so I went over to this guy's house and I had a glass of wine. And I remember I was just like, this is the big deal. This is why I sit at 7:30 in the morning with all these strangers and hold hands. Like, this is not even a big deal. And then I had more and more and more. And then he pulled out ecstasy. And then I ended up over the course of, I don't even know, 6 or 7 hours taking 4.5 hits. And in the morning, I thought nobody needs to know about this. You know, it was November 18th. I was like, I had six-ish months. I was like, no one needs to know. And then I talked to my friend from rehab and I ended up telling him, and then I called my sponsor, and then I went to a meeting that night, and that's where it started.
The anatomy of a relapse. I appreciate you. Like,
yeah,
because it's so relatable, like the seeds, and those seeds, Anna, we can still plant those today, right?
Yeah.
Like that bullshit we tell ourselves, like oh, well, you know, it's not in vogue anymore because this guy who I look up to is not doing it. And, you know, you hear people say that, like, you'll start to drink or you'll think about drinking and you'll be like, yeah, that was just a phase that I went through, you know, all of it. And then the next thing you know, and that's amazing for you too. Like, because here you are, 23 years sober, carrying the message, helping so many people. And it's like these little moments that change everything. Like that morning, like nobody needs to know. And, you know, but you got honest. And what starts to like happen to your life when now all of a sudden you pushed all the chips, you're all in. What happens
I'm all
to you?
in. Well, first of all, what's interesting about those two people that planted the seed, I know them both today. I watched them both struggle for the next decade, in and out. I think one of them is still out. And it's like those were the people I was looking to for inspiration about what to do. That's what happened at the end of that story. I think the other guy, I think one of those guys has like 10 years at this point, but my God, did he struggle. And when I was all in, I was all in. I'm an extremist. So I was like, I needed to tell everybody I was sober. I wanted to get the whole world sober. I did wait 4 years before writing a book about it.
Party
But
girl.
because I really did. I'm grateful I had that perspective, because I see people like be sober 5 minutes and start Instagram accounts where they're like inspiring people and writing books, and I am grateful I waited that long. And then through that book I ended up, you know, really there weren't people out there talking about recovery.
When did the book come out? Like 2004, 2005?
2007.
2007. Okay.
Yeah.
So you write the book 4 years after you're sober in 2004, and then it takes a little while for it to.
Oh, it takes traditional publishing sucks.
Yeah, and that's what we'll talk about too. Stuff what you're involved in now. So that took a while, right? And how did that? Were you writing early on in recovery, like along with all the other stuff you were doing? Were you just like journaling and stuff? Was that an outlet for you still?
Yeah, from 2000, those 4 years, I was writing for magazines. I was writing full time. And I think I kind of got my, you know, writing fulfillment or whatever through that. I think I was trying different things. And then
when did you start to do like TV and stuff?
That was, I'm trying. Okay. What happened was I was writing, I wrote a story for Playboy, I just lucked into this situation where this woman, Amy Sohn, was a friend of my boss at Premiere Magazine. And she calls him and she goes, do you know any writers in LA who would, I have this idea called Sex in Two Cities, where I would switch places with a writer in LA and we would date in each other's cities for a week. We would set each other up on dates and then we would write about it. And he goes, yeah, no, this girl might do it. So she was a hustler. She sells the story to Playboy, but I haven't done anything. And I go to New York to write this story and end up having this crazy time. The crazy thing about it is it's when like Sex in the City is huge. I meet Chris Noth and like go on a date with him like during that week. Again, like this weird, of course, I randomly meet him.
Now, did you
And
mention
so
him? Did you mention I went on a date with Mr. Big in this Playboy
uh,
article, or do you?
it actually was a terrible thing because what happened was we kind of had a thing for a while. He's a wonderful guy, and I didn't put it in the story. I just like called him the TV actor, and then I think I can't again. This was ancient history. Like Page Six wrote about it, and he was like, "I cannot believe you did this," and I was like, "You are right." You know, one of those where you're like, "I've got no excuses. I should not have."
Was it one of those like Page Six like blind items? Like this actor was,
Yeah,
yeah, something like.
no, I think they said his
Oh,
name.
really?
um, and so I meet the
Look, by the
editor
way,
at
I can tell people that aren't watching. I can tell you're like almost in pain
oh,
reliving this. Yeah, yeah,
it was terrible. It's just
yeah.
like not a cool thing to do to anybody. And
Mhm.
and but I meet the editor there, this guy Chris Napolitano, and he's like, "Oh my God, this story! I'm so excited about the story. Would you want to be in the magazine?" And I'm like, "Okay." And so they do this whole shoot where we're not nude, but like it's a Playboy shoot. And I was just like, okay, yeah. And because of the content and like the way they did that story, it was like a huge thing. It was like the then equivalent of viral. And I'm like fielding calls from agents and all this stuff. And we ended up selling it as a reality show pilot to this guy Ken Mock, who created America's Next Top Model. And the pilot wasn't picked up. But you know, when those things happen, I was just like, yeah, of course. Like I didn't realize that was never going to happen again,
Yeah.
that it was this
And you're
total
sober. You're
Cinderella
sober at this
story.
time.
I'm sober. And I really do feel like the universe had been like waiting for me to show up for myself. And it like just presented me with gift after gift after gift, like cash and prizes gifts, like not necessarily the internal ones, those two. And anyway, after that story, I became known as like a sex dating and relationship expert. Oh, wait, I forgot. When I was at Premiere, I started going on TV to talk about celebrities. Like that was just kind of part of the thing you could
Yeah.
get to do. Then it was about sex dating and relationships, and then it was like about recovery. When Party Girl came out, I had a TV agent, and I guess the Today Show called him and was like, "Oh, we got the story about recovery," and he's like, "You know, why don't you like try Anna?" And you know, with TV stuff back then, if you did well, they called you every day.
Yeah.
And back then there weren't, you know, rehab owners with publicists being paid all this money to get them on TV. So I just got to do it all the
And
time.
people didn't know what to do with all this. It's like Paris Hilton, Lindsay Lohan, like all these people are going out getting fucked up, getting in
Yeah.
trouble, and so they needed somebody to lean on, and you could provide insight and talk about your book too.
Yeah. So again, it was like that lucky timing that you don't know is lucky timing. You're just like,
Yeah.
okay.
So you talk, and by the way, so you talk about, I love talking about relationships and stuff in sobriety, and I won't keep you too much longer, about 15 more minutes. So we talk about relationships and sobriety. That was something I really had trouble with. Like when I first got sober, like you go back to like you at that party when,
Yeah.
you couldn't put two sentences together to talk to the Zimmerman dude. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so that's how I was when I got sober. I'm a kid again, everything, it's arrested development. How did you, you're out there dating Chris Noth, but how did you find the ability to get back out there? Because, there was a while where some people might still say it, I'm undateable, but, then you do become dateable. Like, how do you find your way there? Because I think matters of the heart and relationships are such a huge component of why we drink and what happened when we drank.
Totally. My difficulties were not at all that. I could talk to anybody. It was like sobriety unleashed this comfort. It was very strange. Like I was at more parties having more fun than I had ever had. And so that part wasn't challenging. The challenging part was my picker. I just kind of really, and I mean, as far as I understand it, no good dudes showed up for a very, very, very long time. Or if they did, I just didn't treat them very well. And so I just really tried and failed and was very depressed about it and couldn't seem to, get something satisfying going for a very, very, very long time.
And so what's happening to you, like in meetings and in the 12-step community? Like, how are you starting to grow? like internally? Because we talked about externally, and you mentioned like cash and prizes on the outside. How did you find a way to get strength to navigate those waters?
Really, I don't really know, honestly. I mean, I do think that I was kind of dry for a long time, because I look back and I wasn't super nice for like, I
What
don't
was your
know.
like where was for me, was recovery first in your life? Or probably not, right? Because stuff,
You
all
know,
this,
it,
don't let the gifts of sobriety get in the way of the gifts of sobriety. I've heard before,
right.
you know?
It was always, I've always gone to meetings, I've always prayed, I've always had it as a priority. But I think I was missing a kind of, I'm not, I don't even know yet how to articulate it, but I think I was very focused on the external stuff. Even though I'm a great like student, I would do all the things I was supposed to do. And then, and so then I did meet my boyfriend, and I don't know if you know this, like I have a 5-month old.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I knew you had a boyfriend, and I was going to ask you,
Yeah.
like, how do you put together a successful relationship? But congratulations.
Yeah. So my son was born on July 10th, and
Wow.
he was born via surrogate, and it's a complete, I mean, beyond a gift of sobriety. Like, this is not something that happens for people at this age. And but I am a very, I am still that girl who can talk her way into outpatient and an inpatient rehab. So I was like, I'm getting a kid. I do not care what it takes or what we have to do. And, luckily I met a man who was like, sure.
That's kind of what the whole thing is. That's finding the right person. That's your picker now is working. Uh,
The picker began to work. And I will say, I was sober and life was working, but like, it was kind of like the world changed. There were no more magazines. My book deals sucked. Um, the TV stuff was fine, but I wasn't getting paid to do it. I'm dating these undateable men. I'm like not making real money. And I met him, and I will say I did not think he was right at first. Since meeting him, well, no, what happened is I did EMDR. I did trauma therapy. I got some stuff figured out. I met him. My business took off. I bought a house. Um, and we started making the steps towards parenthood.
wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing. I mean, that's the miracles of recovery we talk about. And look, life is it's not all unicorns and rainbows, right? Shit
No.
happens, but along the way, you're being your best self, and you're able to tap into that, and then you create this. What you're doing with publishing is kind of amazing, and it's like to think that it didn't exist before you is like it's like wow, how come that didn't, like so you
Well,
what
that's generous, but other people were. I mean, I really just copied someone else's business. Honestly,
really
full
because that's
disclosure, I was.
well the first I've heard of it was from you, and maybe that's because you do a lot of recovery books and self-help stuff, and
Yeah.
you basically find entrepreneurs will come to you, and you are a vehicle to help them create a book, and you talk about the
Yeah.
fact that your book, it may not make a ton of money, but the idea of having a book is like the best marketing tool of all time, right?
Exactly. I couldn't say it better myself. That's exactly it. What happened is Darren Prince. Darren
No
came to me and was
way.
like, "Oh yeah, I would not have a business without that man."
Wow.
Um,
Yeah, he was just
oh
on
yeah.
here like a month ago. Yeah.
He is a force of nature, and
Yeah.
he reached out to me, and he and I started talking, and he's like, we're going to do something together. When we were trying to figure out what it was, he really wanted to get into recovery advocacy. He wasn't at all, he was just a sports agent. And he asked me to write his book, and I said what I say to anyone who asked me to write a book, which is no. And he was very insistent, and so there was a girl I knew, a writer, who needed work, and I was like, well, what if I hired her to do it? And he goes, as long as you edit it, that's fine. And then he's like, okay, we need to publish. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that. And he goes, well, basically, I'll pay you to figure it out. And figured it out. And then from there, Emily Lynn Paulson, who has who's a big recovery advocate now, came, and it just has been one after the other. Now it's fewer recovery books and more, business books, but it's been, we published about 52 books.
Wow.
And yeah.
How many New York Times bestsellers do you have yourself?
I only have one. I love that it gets misconstrued. I was on a podcast and they posted it yesterday and they were like, she had 6 New York Times bestsellers by the age of 28. And I wrote them. I was like, that is not remotely accurate. Please, no.
So your first book was Party Girl. And then how many have you written? 7?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. You can't, I kind of do some as projects. I don't even know some of them which to count. I co-wrote a couple. So, but I say 8, but more like 10 or 11.
How close was Party Girl, or is it still, to being turned into a movie?
Closer all the time. It's been optioned over and over again. The difference this time is that we actually have the money. And the most beautiful, insane part of it is I signed an option agreement with a guy I know, sober guy. He randomly finds a business partner, and that business partner was one of my closest friends at Trinity. He was engaged to my roommate, and most of our early partying was with him. So he is now controlling the funding for it. So it's just this beautiful full circle moment. We have we just got a director, and it's out to actresses right now. So we're talking about shooting in June.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty cool. Did you meet Darren in recovery?
No, he reached out to me, and this is I always talk about when people are like social media, whatever. He found me through a hashtag on Instagram.
Wow.
Like a recovery hashtag. He was searching, and he reached out to me and was like, I'm going to be in LA. And I'm so bummed. I have a meeting in 8 minutes because I could talk to you forever.
All right. Last thing. What are you doing now every day to stay sober, to stay serene, and to bring this kind of energy that you did today for a guy like me, some rando on a podcast about recovery? Like, how do you continue to bring it like that?
I go to a meeting every day, pretty much. I skipped yesterday and I was such a bitch. God, wow. Because of Zoom, that's much easier. I pray and meditate every day. I sponsor, not that many people ask me to sponsor them, and I get incredibly offended by that, but I do have a sponsee who's amazing. And I continue to show up and try to be the best person I can be and try to be of service.
What do you tell somebody, a young woman or a guy, who's like, Anna, I can't get a day? What do I do? Somebody that's listening right now.
I say, I get it. Most everyone I know was in that situation. Some of us did it before coming to 12-step, and some of us do it after. I would imagine doing it after is more painful, to actually show up, see there's a solution, not be able to do it. I did all of that. I did all my, I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit. I can't quit before really I got there. I would say, keep trying. If I could have the formula for surrender, Elon Musk would not be the richest person alive. I would be. I do not know how it works. I just know that I've had multiple surrenders in my life, and what has preceded them is deepest pain I know. And so if you're in that state, it can happen any moment. There's this moment of willingness and grace that just crosses. And if you get that, latch onto that. And if you haven't gotten that, it is coming.
Anna David, you're the best. Thank you so much.
Oh my God, that was so fun.
Yeah. Again, I so appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much. You were literally the best interviewer I've ever talked to. And that's the truth.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for listening to the Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.